But here's what often happens when we get into that sales conversation is I get stuck inside my own head and I self-sabotage before that conversation can happen. Now, sometimes it's about the brand. In other words, am I confident and comfortable with the product that I'm offering? And so what I used to find myself doing, because I would make a pitch and then they would say no, but now I've come to a place where I realize that if my customer says no, then my job isn't to get them from no to yes. My job is to get them from no to maybe. And of course, if they say maybe, then my job is to make sure that I keep them in a maybe and maybe even promote them to a yes. And what I'm really not trying to do is I'm trying to avoid having that conversation end with a no. And how do you do that? Well, that is where you become very skilled at dealing with objections. Hey everybody, it's Abe Brown here, and I want to spend a couple of moments with you today talking about something that I think is so important. Now, the reason I think it's so important is because literally in today's society, every single one of us is actually selling something. And that's why I want to talk to you about 3 sales secrets that the pros don't want you to know. I'll tell you what, when I say that everyone is selling something, I mean it. I mean, from real estate agents to politicians to plumbers to that person who's working as a barista at Starbucks, literally to the person who's knocking on the door, soliciting donations for a nonprofit. I mean, literally every single one of us is persuading and selling someone to do something. An example of this even would be a mom trying to sell their kids on why they should clean their room, on why they should do their dishes, on why they should learn to do their own laundry. You see, the act and the art of persuasion is applicable to every single area of life. And that's why I want to share with you 3 sales secrets here today that are going to transform your life. And the real pros don't want you to know these because these are the secrets that have made them literally hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. So the very first sales secret that the pros don't often want you to know is that it's actually not about you. Now, when you think about that, you know, you could be thinking to yourself, I don't want to sell because sales is all about me and I don't feel confident and I don't look that great and I'm not necessarily the person who's the expert on the product. And oftentimes we self-sabotage even before we get to that sales conversation. I don't know if you're like me in this area, but I can be my own worst enemy. And what that means is I'm thinking about the person that I'm trying to persuade or the person that I'm trying to make that offer to or the person that I'm trying to get to sign off on the deal. But before that conversation ever happens, I get trapped inside my own head so that by the time that conversation actually occurs, I'm stuck and I'm not able to get my words out and I'm not able to communicate effectively. Therefore, you can lose the sale. And so one of the things that was really helpful to me was the understanding that in sales, it's actually not about me. Now, why am I saying it's not about you? Because in sales, every one of us at the end of the day is a brand ambassador. That means it's about the brand. And so it's not about Abe, it's about the brand that Abe is representing. And so the question then comes, well, how should I represent the brand? You know, I know how to represent me, but some days I'm feeling confident, other days I'm not feeling so confident. But if I know how to represent the brand, then every single day I can come and represent that brand with class, with confidence, and with sass. And so how do I represent the brand? Let me give you one word that is absolutely critical to representing whatever brand you are trying to represent. And listen, it doesn't matter, again, if you're that barista at Starbucks or if you're working at the Safeway, slinging groceries, or if you're at the McDonald's front counter, or if you are a CEO or an entrepreneur. The key concept in branding is one word, and honestly, one word only. I don't care what your brand is. It's excellence. I'll tell you what, excellence honors God and excellence inspires people. Now, you might say, well, I got a grunge brand, bro. I need to be grungy for my brand. And I've actually met people like that. I'm old enough to remember a time when, having holes in your pants was a mark of poverty rather than a mark of, $200 jeans. As a matter of fact, I grew up very, very poor. And so most of my jeans had holes in them, not because I was trying to be cool, but literally because they were so worn out. We grew up poor. That's the way it is. Now today, people kind of have this grunge mentality and they kind of have this, I want to look like I'm sloppy. But listen, even if that is your brand, if sloppy is your brand, then do that with excellence. I'll tell you what, if grunge is your brand, then do that with excellence. But if you are selling yourself as a business person, if you are selling yourself as a professional, then every single interaction needs to be professional. Why? Because you are every single day telling the story of your brand. That's why sometimes, when you work in large corporations, it's very difficult because there's always somebody who's like, well, I'm going to be my own person. I don't want to represent the brand. And maybe that's okay. But if you're going to do that, then make sure you show up with excellence. Just a couple of weeks ago, I was in Asia in a very high-level business meeting. And this is really interesting because you had multimillionaires and billionaires sitting at the table. And a person came into that meeting who really didn't look like they belonged there. And it was not so much because they were lacking in intelligence. It wasn't necessarily because they were lacking in a sort of cognitive understanding of what was going on. But you could tell in the way that they carried themselves, even how they dressed, how they comported themselves, that they were off brand with all of the other people who were sitting in the room. And listen, this wasn't a room filled with people who were wearing full suits and ties and tuxedos. This was a group of people who were business casual, but clearly one person didn't get the memo that you're supposed to represent your brand, a multi-million-dollar brand, in a way that is going to bring excellence to the table. Do you know what Martin Luther King Jr. said? He said this: all labor that uplifts humanity has dignity and importance and should be undertaken with painstaking excellence. Can I say that again? I love that so much. He said that all labor, so it doesn't matter if you're that barista at Starbucks, or if you're digging ditches, or if you're working in the military, or if you're that high-level CEO, all labor that uplifts humanity has dignity and importance and should be undertaken, I love this, with painstaking excellence. Okay. And so this whole idea that the first sales secret, that it's not about you, is so important. You've got to represent the brand, and that means bring excellence to the table. But part of that is also making sure, as you're representing the brand, that you are offering your personal experience of how this brand has impacted you along the way. You're not just saying, hey, this is the best brand ever, but sometimes you get the feeling that people are selling something that they don't believe in. And that's where sometimes Google reviews can come in handy. That's sometimes where customer testimonials can come in handy. But there's nothing more powerful than personal experience. And so sales secret number one that the pros don't want you to know is that it's not really about you. It's about the brand. And it's about how you carry yourself, how you comport yourself. I hope that you make a decision, however you look, to carry yourself with excellence. The second thing that the second sales secret that the pros don't want you to know is that it is all about you. Now, you're like, well, wait a second. Now I'm confused. First, it's not about me. Now it is about you. Yes. And the reason for that is that sales, though it's not complicated, there are nuanced levels of complexities. And so though I'm representing the brand, there is also an element in which I am representing who? Myself. That's where confidence comes into play. Now, confidence is not necessarily talking louder than the other person. Confidence is not necessarily being flamboyant. Listen, there's a lot of introverted people who are unbelievably confident. But here's what often happens when we get into that sales conversation. And I probably have 20, 30 sales conversations a week. And listen, I don't call them discovery calls necessarily. I'm not saying, hey, I'm pitching you something, because most of the high-level business that I do is conversations. But I'll tell you what, sometimes what happens is I get stuck inside my own head and I self-sabotage before that conversation can happen. Now, sometimes it's about the brand. In other words, am I confident and comfortable with the product that I'm offering? But sometimes I'm not well prepared. sometimes I haven't really put thought and energy and even research into some of the questions that the person might have, some of the objections that they might have, some of the reasons that they might say, why not? And so what I used to find myself doing, because I would make a pitch and then they would say no, and then I would walk away like a little, beaten up dog with my tail between my legs, and I'd, beat up on myself, and I'd, cry, and I'd lick my wounds. But now I've come to a place where I realize that if my customer says no, then my job isn't to get them from no to yes. My job is to get them from no to maybe. And of course, if they say maybe, then my job is to make sure that I keep them in a maybe, and maybe even promote them to a yes. And what I'm really not trying to do is I'm trying to avoid having that conversation end with a no. And how do you do that? Well, that is where you become very skilled at dealing with objections. And what's the best way to become skilled at dealing with objections? Empathy, understanding. I mean, if that customer says to you, well, I'm not sure about your price, you seem pretty high priced. I mean, the worst thing you can do is say, oh, hey, wait a second, we're the best price out there. Because of course, now you're getting into a debate contest with your customer. And even if you win the argument, you'll lose the war. And so what do you want to do? You'll lose the sale. So what do you want to do? You want to empathize. Yeah, hey, you know what? The price is high. And we have really become aware in the last little while that the economy is tough and people are suffering. Did you know that recently we actually adjusted our prices down, but we didn't want to take them down so far because we want to make sure that we maintain the highest standard of excellence and the highest standard of quality so that we can get to you exactly what you need. Now, not everyone is going to be your customer. Not everyone is going to be able to pay for and afford the stuff that you're offering, but you don't want to have them walk away saying no. What you want to have them walking away is, well, maybe, and maybe I'll consider it. And at that point, then perhaps what you do is you touch them a little bit later, you reach out, you do some follow-up. Did you know that about 80% of sales happen from the 6th to the 10th contact? And so a lot of the time people get themselves into this mindset where they say, well, I had the first contact, I didn't get a sale, I guess I'm a failure. But what I've discovered is just don't let them end on a no. Have them end on a maybe, or I'll still think about it, or maybe I'll consider it later. All right, that's great. I'll make sure I circle back. And of course, I have customers who have been with me literally for over a decade. And so I can promise you that there is something to respecting people, listening to their objections, being empathetic, trying to understand where they're coming from, and just keeping that window open. As long as that window's open, there's an opportunity for that sale to come. So the first sales secret the pros don't want you to know is that it's not about you. But the second one is that it is about you. How you engage, the confidence that you have, and how you reach people. The third sales secret that the pros do not want you to know is that it's all about the brain. Now, the brain is an amazing thing. I know that we're all like jacked out today, geeking out over AI and how cool AI is. And listen, I think it's great. I think AI is wonderful, but AI is not nearly as awesome as the human brain. The human brain that you have and I is an unbelievable machine of not only surviving, but thriving. The human brain has an unbelievable capacity to send a signal to the entirety of your potential customer's body that what you're offering is either safe or it's a danger. Now, you might say, well, wait a second, I'm not selling guns. What I'm selling isn't dangerous. No, I'm not talking about that. But what the brain does is a quick analysis around their financial situation, around the other relationships in their life. It does a quick scan of the landscape of what's actually happening in the other areas of that person's world. And so you come along with your sale and you're like, hey, I got this great thing. And you know what? It's reasonably priced. And will you buy it? And all the brain hears is a threat. Maybe it's a threat to their bank account. Maybe it's a threat to the other relationships in their life. Maybe it's a threat to another a product supplier that they already have a loyalty to. And so one of the things that you want to do is to disarm the brain. And I mean that genuinely. You never want the brain to see you and what you're offering as a threat. You want the brain to see you and what you're offering as safety. And how do you do that? Well, I'll tell you, one of the greatest models I've seen for creating brain safety is called the SCARF model. And this is not mine. I'm happy to give credit to a neuroscientist by the name of Dr. David Rock. And in 2008, he talked about this thing called the SCARF model. That's an acronym, and it's so easy to remember. And I find myself, since I learned this about a decade ago, I use this now subconsciously in almost every conversation. Not every conversation, but in absolutely the most of them. The S stands for status. So what Dr. David Rock was saying is when you elevate the status of somebody else, that creates a sense of safety. And so how can you do that? Well, you can do that with just a sincere compliment. You can do that with gratitude. You can do that with a sincere thank you. The key is that you're not giving a word salad. And the key is that you're not being insincere. But the key is just authentically you're speaking to the status of that person and you're building them up. And so, in some of these meetings I was at in Asia a couple of weeks ago, when I would go into meetings, I would do a little bit of homework on the person ahead of time. And, you can do that by looking at their LinkedIn profile or Googling them or finding out what's going on with them. And I would just say to them something like, hey, I saw this news article about you. Man, I'm so impressed with what you did. Boom. Just that simple. I didn't have to, get down and worship them or roll out the red carpet, but it was just, I noticed something about you. And all of a sudden, their status goes up just a little bit. So they feel safe. The second thing is certainty. Now, uncertainty creates a lack of safety. Certainty creates safety. That's why doing your homework as a salesperson and knowing your stuff is so important, because when the customer says to you, well, what about this or what about that? And you go white as a sheet because you don't know the answers and they're asking you questions that you haven't even thought of. Well, of course, that's going to make them feel threatened because it's like, dude has no idea what he's talking about. He's just trying to sell me this garbage thing, but he doesn't actually know. I get questions all the time because I sell everything from $5,000 coaching programs to, multi-million dollar investments. And when I think about the things that I sell, I always think when the questions come, and I get tough questions, if I give you $1 million, how do I know you're going to generate a return? If I give this, how do I know that? All of a sudden, that is an opportunity for me to either create certainty or to reinforce uncertainty. And so know your stuff, friends. Have the ability to identify with the question, empathize. Thank you for asking that. That is a great question. Wow, I thought of that too. And you know what I discovered? And then you go ahead and create that certainty. The A stands for autonomy. Now, autonomy is about this idea of the power of choice. Now, we all know that it's our customer's choice, but the problem is every one of us in 2024, 2025 is going around the world feeling like everybody has an agenda for us. We have no power. We have no autonomy. We have no agency. And so I found as a salesperson, I constantly ask this question: can I have your permission to share this? Would you mind if I talk about that? Would it be okay with you if I talked about this benefit? And by constantly asking permission, I'm giving them autonomy, but I'm also kind of training their brain to say yes a lot to me, because you don't want them to train. You don't want to train their brain to say no. So you got status, certainty, autonomy. R is relatedness. And this is how relationally connected are you? Now, this doesn't mean that you have to be best friends, but there is no doubt that friendly people outperform and outsell people who are unfriendly. And so if you're like, well, what's in it for me to be friendly? I'll tell you what, everything is in it for you. Nobody wants to be around Debbie Downer or Sad Simon all the time. You know what I'm saying? So what you got to do is sometimes put your happy face on, and you might not be feeling it, but I can promise you, if you learn emotional regulation, and that means not allowing your feelings to control your life, but showing up with intentionality, showing up with focus. Today, I'm going to be confident. Today, I'm going to be friendly. Today, I'm going to be a people person. Today, I'm going to operate in emotional intelligence. Today, I'm going to put their needs in front of mine. All of a sudden, now you have the magic of relatedness working for you. And that takes us to the F, which is the last part of this SCARF model, which is fairness. You know what? Sometimes people will ask you questions that don't fit in with your policy or your process or your procedure and sometimes even the way your company likes to do it. But if you can make sure that they feel like they're being treated fairly, then of course you're going to keep their brain feeling safe. But the moment somebody feels like, hey, this guy is being unfair with me, they're not listening to me, they're not hearing what I have to say, they don't care what I have to say, I'll tell you what, that just triggers an absolute cascade of a lack of safety, a sense of danger, and all of a sudden you've lost the sale, not because what you were selling was wrong, but because you didn't create the kind of safety that would allow their brain to send a message to their body that, yes, this sale is not going to hurt you. And so, hey, 3 sales secrets the pros don't want you to know. Number 1, it's not about you. It's about the brand. Number 2, it is about you. Confidence matters. But number 3, it's all about the brain. Think about their brain as either your greatest ally or your greatest enemy in the sense of getting your sale, and think, how do I make sure their brain is working for me rather than against me? Now, I hope this has been helpful to you. I'll tell you what, at flourishingworkplace.com, we are 100% focused on creating healthy workplace culture, on building strength in your team, in your leadership, and in the psychological safety of the people in your organization, be it for-profit or nonprofit. So please do reach out, touch us, and we will connect you. And I'll tell you what, we will work with you to support the creation of a healthy workplace culture that's going to drive better business results. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you in our next episode.